Welcome to the With You and For You podcast. Our desire is to equip college-age students within the Edmond, OKC area by discussing topics and questions that are relevant to our generation. With that in mind, let's get to the show. Hey, welcome back, guys, to the With You and For You podcast. It is your host, Riley Jackson, along with the usual crew, Chris Dadai, Tyson Hill, and Kyle Thomas. So today's going to be a little bit different, and I'm just jumping right into it.
Oh, I get it. I get it.
No banter today.
You got places to be.
We just bantered.
Huh?
We just bantered.
You
You got places to be.
I do.
You got laundry
Got
to do.
laundry to do. And, today we're going to be talking about decision making and the art of decision making, if you want to call that.
Is that a book?
So
What?
Is that a book?
I don't know.
I
Isn't
think
there
it
a book?
is.
I think you should make it
The
a
art
book.
of decision.
There's an art of something.
I don't read
The
books.
lost art of disciple making.
There's that. But there's
Ah.
another
That's
one.
it.
I thought
Oh,
there was.
okay.
Anyway.
That's okay. The reason we're talking about this is because
We will make you artists
we
in decision making.
hopefully, but we we just honestly kind of just didn't know what to talk about, and we're just like, oh, okay, what if we just talked about decision making, because we're having a really tough time making a decision about what we're going to talk about. So that was our kind of whole idea with it, and we're going to be kind of just going through decision making and how sometimes in today's age it's hard to make decisions. We are presented with a bunch of options, and making decisions can be really difficult sometimes. So I first want to start off with, why is it difficult for us to actually make decisions, whether they be big or small, no matter the size? It's sometimes really difficult for us to make decisions. Why is it so difficult?
That's a good question.
I think that there are two-ish reasons, I would say. One of them is that we don't want to be wrong, and so we have this paralysis of making decisions because we don't want to choose the wrong one and then have to live with those consequences or whatever. And another one is we don't want to not. Oh my gosh, I was going to throw in so many negative words there. Like, we don't want to not please people, and so and the reason I say this one is on Sunday after church, how often are you sitting in there trying to figure out where you want to eat, and you're too afraid to say your opinion because you don't want to make anyone mad or whatever. And so I think those are kind of the two reasons that we don't want to be wrong, and we don't want to upset people.
Yeah.
I would say, kind of along with that, especially with big decisions, I think it's because we're just afraid of commitment, in a lot of different ways, or even just with small things, like if you're deciding where to go eat, and you're like, okay, well, I chose Chick-fil-A, but the whole way there you're like, but what if I really wanted Cane's? Like, what if that was the better option, kind of thing. I think we're just scared of commitment because we are scared that, oh, there's something else better out there, or making a wrong decision. And we're scared, again, of commitment because we feel like that's us tying ourselves down to something, whether that be what college am I going to, what job am I going to do afterwards, making those decisions. It is a commitment in some way, shape, or form. And we just put a lot of pressure on it when sometimes it's just, you just got to make a decision.
I think we just make them bigger than they really need to be. Obviously, and I know this is probably something we'll talk about, FOMO is very real. I was talking to students just this past Thursday and talking about spring retreat, and one of them was like, well, I'll probably go because, FOMO is real, in my life, and I don't want to miss out. And it's just a lot of students live in that now, to where it's if I don't go to this thing and I see it on social media, I'm going to feel like I really missed this awesome opportunity. But on the flip side of that, we also just make these things out to be big because we think God's will is this direct line, and all of this pressure is on us to align with God's will. And so we have to make the right decision. So I have to go to the right college. I have to marry the right person. that God has for me. I have to have the right job that God has for me. Like if I say yes to this place over this place and it doesn't work out, clearly that wasn't God's will and I made a mistake. So I think we get super anxious and fearful of making the wrong decision, as Tyson kind of mentioned. Like, and so we just make all of our decisions like this overwhelming, insurmountable. Like, oh, it's this giant mountain that if I screw up, then I'm gonna fall down this thing, and it's gonna hit. I'm gonna hit every rock on the way down. Like so.
So, with this almost fear of decision making, because like you all listed, there's so many things that kind of make us fearful about making decisions. How do we change our perspective about decision making? Since it isn't a negative thing to make decisions, how do we kind of just turn it around to make it a good thing, like just to be decisive?
Yeah. I think putting yourself in situations where you have to make a decision and understanding um, making the decision is, I mean, honestly, like a sign of maturity, and I would say even growing. Uh, but sometimes this can come natural. So, like my daughter, who's 5, she can go into a store and instantly know what she wants. It's like, hey, Ron, here's $5, and she walks in, she's like, I want this. My son, I'll be there for an hour and a half. Guaranteed. He's gonna be like, "Oh, I want this. No, maybe I want that. No, maybe I want this." And so the children, it's not like I've been sitting there saying, "Hey, don't make the wrong decision. Hey, don't do this." Like it's just kind of this natural thing to where some people can be more decisive than others. They just know what they want and they go after it and they do what they need to do to get it. Others, we sit there and we think about everything, and then we get overwhelmed, and then we make no decision, right? Um, so I think putting yourself into kind of these just situations where it's like, hey, like, all right, am I going to go to spring retreat this weekend? Or, hey, am I going to be involved in this discipleship group? Or am I going to do these things? Like, you can think of these things that you're like, well, hey, if it's available, yeah, it makes sense to go. But those can be small things that you're helping to build up your decision making in the sense of, hey, I'm going to make the decision to eat this for breakfast and not this, or to go here for lunch and not there. Instead of trying to please everyone in the group, throw out your idea. Hey, guys, I think we go here for lunch. Um, just being decisive and making that decision. So then you're not sitting around for an hour and a half, not doing anything. Or in the same way of like, hey, you're hanging out with your friends, like, hey guys, okay, we're gonna watch this show, or we're gonna watch this movie, or whatever. Those things can help you in making bigger decisions. And I think the other thing is, and this is where Scripture talks about, Jesus says, "Let your yes be yes, your no be no." Once you've made the decision, unless something comes up that's like, hey, okay, I really need to change this thing, then stick to it. Like once you personally have decided, hey, I'm going to be a part of this, okay, then commit to that. Don't get halfway through the semester and then back out. Oh man, I'm busier than I thought I was going to be. Well, no, like I need to honor my commitments according to the Lord. Like I need to honor my commitments. So make your decision and then stick to it. And that will help you in the future, I think, maybe checking your calendar beforehand, looking at everything to see, hey, do I have time to do this? It can help you just in being like, all right, hey, I'm not really enjoying this thing, but I need to honor my commitment. So I'm going to persevere, because a lot of things that I think can help us or hurt us in decision making are we decide the things we really want to do. We make time for the things we really want to do, when sometimes you're going to be doing things you don't want to do, and you just have to persevere and stick to that. So putting those things into practice can really help in decision making and helping us grow in decisiveness, because sometimes we think, I'm just not good at making decisions, and we rest in that, right? It's like, well, because I'm not good at it, that's my excuse. And that's clearly not, I don't think God wants us to be in that. God wants us to be decisive. He wants us to be intentional in the things that we choose to do. And understand whatever you choose to do, it's irrelevant like what other people are telling you to do, right? And so being firm and confident, and hey, no, like this is what I need to do for my own personal walk with Christ, for my own sanity, for whatever. Like these are the things that I need to do, and I'm just going to be secure in that. Is I think a good way to practice.
I think when it comes to like group decision making, one thing to like reframe the way you think about it is like, don't be afraid to state your opinion, because like in group decision making, compromise is good. And so like by throwing out your opinion, it's not, we kind of get our head wrapped up that, oh, like if people don't agree with my opinion, that means that they don't like me. Whereas like, no, like just state what you want. And then if that's what the group wants, awesome. If it's not one, we can work on a compromise here. I think oftentimes people don't like compromise, even though like compromise is how relationships work. And then as far as like independent decision making about like, okay, what college I'm going to, all these things, I think that our priming, the way that we think about decisions, is like framed in the fact that for our whole schooling career, there's always been a right answer. And so in our brain, there has to be a right answer. When a majority of these decisions that we're making, there's not necessarily a right answer. We just need to pick one and stick with it and work through it. And so like understanding that like, okay, if there's not a right answer, then it's okay just to pick the one I like the most. And if there's one I like second most, then like, okay, let's just take a deep breath and pick one. I've flipped a coin if it's 50-50. I mean, pick out one and keep going. One person told me like if you're stuck between two decisions, like flip a coin, and then if where that landed made you sad, then pick the other decision.
Yeah.
Oh man, flip it again. Oh man.
But I think that like the framing of like, okay, like it's not like school. There's not a right answer to everything.
I mean, I would say even like from personal experience within group settings and making decisions like that, I most of like the fear that comes from like trying to make a decision is the fear of like feeling embarrassment for making that decision, or feeling like dumb for, or somebody like calling you out for saying that thing, or like making that suggestion to go to that restaurant or something like that. And just to be honest with you, that may happen sometimes. Like there's a reality within making decisions that like sometimes people just aren't going to agree with you. And I hate to say that, like that's reality in most group decision making.
That's because we all have opinions.
Exactly.
And
We all have different.
That's okay. Opinions are okay.
Exactly. But I do want to like encourage you that like that's okay. Like that having opinions is all right. And you may not agree what other people throw out there sometimes. Like if, for example, I'm not a big fan of Chick-fil-A, and everybody wants to go to Chick-fil-A sometimes. And I'm just like,
You're not a big fan?
I agree.
I don't think I've ever eaten a
That's
Chick-fil-A
what I'm
with you.
I
Riley.
agree.
it's like it's kind of overrated.
Well, it's just
But-
not filling.
Yeah, you could get so much more food at McDonald's. I'm kidding.
I-
That's
okay,
that's
I was
that's a joke. That's a joke. Chick-fil-A
I
is
think
better
my
than
wife
McDonald's.
just ran from her school to come here and slap
Oh no,
you.
I'll,
No, I'm just
I'll,
kidding.
I'll
I'm just
choose
kidding.
McDonald's any day of the week over Chick-fil-A.
Really?
Oh,
McDonald's
yeah.
is real gross.
Wow.
Yeah.
McDonald's is
Okay.
real gross.
Well, I mean, if you're wanting a lot of food, McDonald's, but like quality,
Just
like
make
Chick-fil-A is
food
still a
at
little
home.
bit better. I'm just well, that's just
Let's
an
get back on
example.
topic.
That's just an example.
This is a terrible example. I need
I'm
you
sorry.
to pick a different one.
Okay, I'm sorry. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about.
I don't agree with you.
How dare you
I know, my bad.
suggest?
I mean,
the
Tyson's
Lord's
the one that brought in the
chicken?
audacity of
Yeah.
McDonald's is so much better.
But I'm not a big fan of Chick-fil-A, and other people are, and that's okay. And like if I'm there in a group setting and I'm I'm not feeling Chick-fil-A because I don't like it that much, that's totally okay.
Riley's like, I'm just gonna suck it up and eat it, and I will, yes, have my chicken sandwich.
And
Thank you.
sometimes it's like that too. Sometimes you just got to
I'll
compromise,
get
like
my
Tyson was
spicy
saying,
chicken sandwich, a side of sweet sriracha, and I'll be good to go.
and you'll be good to go from there. So that was just kind of an encouragement to say that sometimes people are going to disagree with you, and that's okay.
So here's the the question, because obviously I think we've talked about some minor things, right? Hey, where our group is going to eat is not a big deal.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But if we're talking to a lot of college students, okay, or in that young adult age, and they are starting to make major life decisions, okay, maybe they came to school and the intent was to be an engineer or to be a doctor or to be a lawyer or to do whatever the things that maybe their parents kind of agreed upon them doing. But the Holy Spirit has, come into their life or it's really grabbed a hold of them. And now they have the intent of like, man, maybe ministry is what God wants me to do, or maybe missions, or maybe I'm still going to be an engineer, but I'm going to be an engineer and I'm going to leverage that overseas for the gospel, or a doctor overseas and do these things for people that desperately need physical help, but spiritual help as well. So how do you handle that situation when it comes to, okay, it's not just my friends disagreeing about where to eat lunch. Now it's my parents or loved ones um, very opposed to where God is leading me. How do you handle that situation?
Yeah, I think that's a common thread that we see, especially with people who, like, there's indecisiveness of like not knowing what major you want to choose, but there's a lot of people who come in and like, I have to do this, and then they're like, oh frick, I don't want to do this, and normally it's because there's this pressure from their parents and they want to please their parents, and really it's like, I think it comes down to a hard conversation that people don't want to have, and that's the hard part, because some of these people, maybe they're supported by their parents if they choose this degree and whatever, and so they don't want to upset their parents with their choice to not do that. But like ultimately, like the will of the Lord and the will of your parents may not be the same thing, and what we've seen, and I mean, if you disagree, you can go look at the story of Jonah. Is that being within the will of the Lord is the best place to be, and so if that contradicts what your parents want, then like it's gonna suck. But ultimately, it'll be better for you, and Jesus says that, like, like if you follow him, like it'll put rifts between you and your father, or you and your mother, and so like it's a common thing, and it isn't what we want to be in, but like, are we going to stand up for the Lord on in all of our life, or are we just going to stand up to the Lord in 80%? And when it comes to home life, all good. And so that's the thing, is like understanding, like, okay, like if I need to have a hard conversation with my parents, like it's not going to be fun, and I may need to make even infinitely more decisions after that. And I think sometimes we get scared of that. It's like, if I make this decision, then I have to make more decisions to correct to that decision. But like my motivation to you would be like, living within the will of the Lord is going to be a lot better than living within the will of your parents.
I think a lot of it also goes down to like what are your motives for the decision that you're making? Because like let's say the Lord calls you to even just go overseas for a summer, and your parents are like no, and you're like, well, I'm staying here because my parents said no. Like, what was your motivating factor in that? Like, was it the conviction that you had from the Lord, or was it your parents? And I think there's also a very real aspect of this that college students need to hear, and I tell girls all this all the time, is you are an adult now, and it is okay to make decisions away from your parents. And I think even in also like, and not just your parents, but even just like your friends and like your friends back home, because that can even be tension building, especially if they're not having the same experience as you and they're not growing in their faith like you are. It can just be hard, and they may not understand it. Your parents may not understand it, but again, like, what is your conviction on this? And then I do want to also say, because I was thinking about this, when you do make a decision, and let's say like you make the decision to go overseas or whatever it is, and then in that decision you're like, I think I chose the wrong decision. And I think a lot of us can feel that way because we're still stuck in, well, what would have happened if I would have chose the other thing, and we're not giving our 100% to the decision that we did make. And so, like, I encourage you, whatever decision you make and whatever conviction that you have from the Holy Spirit, like, give your 100% to it, or you're going to spend the whole time in that decision wondering what would have happened in the other decision that you could have made, when that isn't what you committed to. And I think it's so funny. And I was also thinking this, that, like, especially if you think about your story and how you came to know Christ, like, when you committed to Christ, like, that is a very big deal, and that's a very big decision. And that's just a very big decision to make. And then we're over here struggling on deciding where to eat after church or whatever. But it's like, when you commit, like, to following the Lord, like, you've committed to following the Lord in all things, and you've made that decision. And so let that decision lead all your other decisions in that as well.
Yeah, and I think that one thing we have to understand, and this would be my encouragement in some way, is that if you let other people live your life for you, you're going to naturally build up bitterness towards them.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you spend your whole life trying to live to what your parents want or what your grandparents want or whatever, you're going to build up this silent bitterness that will explode one day or whatever, whereas you can just address the conflict as soon as you see it and then work on the reconciliation after that instead of like just prolonging this process, because it might blow up. They may not talk to you, but if you do it then or 30 years from now, it's still going to have the same repercussions. And so, like, living within the will of the Lord can have consequences on earth because people don't understand that. In John 13, Jesus is washing his disciples' feet, and Peter kind of throws a fit about it. And Jesus says, "You do not understand what I'm doing now, but you will eventually." That's not exactly what he says, but it's what he says. But that's not direct quote. But like, we have to understand that is our walk at times. That Jesus was misunderstood by those closest to him until after the resurrection, or whenever he came back, they all still didn't believe that he'd come back, even though he had told them a lot of times that he would. And so, like, take solace in the fact that, like, okay, if man doesn't understand you, that's okay. Because if you're within the will of the Lord, that is a way better place to be. And the Lord has promised to never leave you. He never once promised that man wouldn't leave you. And so it's just something that we have to get used to, of like, sometimes you have to confront people with the truth. And it's not just in decision-making about career or school or job, but also in confronting a brother or sister for a sin struggle. It's the same process of like, are you willing to have hard conversations for the Lord? Or even sharing the gospel. It's a very hard conversation to have, especially if you do it for the first time. But are you willing to have hard conversations for the Lord?
I also think an easy way to make decisions, especially when it comes to the Lord, is just overall, like, consciously just be like, and we say this all the time, like, I'm just going to put my yes on the table. So when the decision comes to either go overseas, or, like, because you feel like the Lord is calling you to do that, or to stay home because your parents don't want you to go, your decision's already in place because you're like, well, I've already put my yes on the table, so we're going to go where the Lord calls me to go. And you don't have to have that internal wrestling because you're like, I've already committed this to the Lord. Wherever he calls, like, I will go. And your decision is just made for you just then, because you're like, well, here it is. Like, I've already made this. And then you just follow in that wherever he leads. And again, like, you may not fully understand it, or like wherever he calls you to, or anything like that. But if you're sitting there and you're like, my yes is on the table and I'm just going to go, then, I mean, just go where he calls you to go.
For me, this actually hits home pretty well. And I, at one point in my life, like right after I graduated high school, my initial thought process was that I was just going to be a fireman, that I was going to go through Tulsa Community College for 2 years, get my fire protection degree, and then go right into the fire academy to be a fireman. And I had that completely planned out, all set and ready to go. And I started working within a church and started being an intern for the BCM, and the Lord called me out of that. And it was not something that was easy, because I'm the type of guy who likes to have a plan and go with it no matter what. And it was honestly my parents who talked me out of it. They kind of sat me down and were just like, "Man, you're not invested into being a fireman. You're not doing it to your 100% like capacity and capability, what's going on, what needs to change, and that's when I kind of knew that like I didn't need to do this anymore. I didn't need to pursue that career, and I started pursuing ministry and started pursuing another degree. So I was very fortunate and lucky to have parents who believed in me and supported me in whatever I wanted to do, which was very awesome and very cool to see. Um, which is why I'm here now and why I'm here with UCO and helping with the podcast and everything like that. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Lord calling me out of fire protection and being a fireman.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And,
um,
and I mean, my story's similar. That I mean, I spent from elementary through early years of adulthood working on becoming a police officer, making all my decisions based off that. And then as the Lord changed my heart, finding out that wasn't His plan for my life. And some people would look at that and the fact that I have a degree in forensic science and psychology and be like, oh, well, you made the wrong decision then. You should have gone to a Christian school and gotten a Christian degree. But it was like, no, like every decision I made along the way was one that was within the will of the Lord to get me to where I am now. And so within that, whenever He called me to ministry, He didn't call me to change my major. And so I got the degree in what I wanted.
Yeah.
And so, like, sometimes we can look back on our lives and think, like, oh my gosh, I made the wrong decision. But, like, the will of the Lord works without us, and it works in a way that we don't understand. And so, just because looking back on it, it's like, oh, well, you could have set yourself up better if you got this degree instead of that degree. It's like, no, like, this is the path the Lord wanted for me. And so, like, we don't have to put so much weight on making the right decision that sets us up for the best future. Sometimes just living within the will of the Lord at that moment will be what sets you up for the best future. I say sometimes, all the time.
And so going back to, I mean, Riley, because I mean, you and I had plenty of conversations, right, regarding what you felt like the Lord was calling you to do, but then also kind of this tear between fire protection and the world and that kind of stuff. Like, so were there moments without having a conversation with parents that you were super anxious, like in bringing and approaching that subject with them?
100%. Like I would say so because I've always wanted to please them to the best of my ability, and like I've that's something I've really always just kind of struggled with. And I wouldn't say that it's a bad thing to want to make your parents happy and to be there for them and try to do your best for them. But I would say it got to the point where it was like sinful. Like I was living more to please people and to please my parents rather than to follow in the will of God. So I would 100% say I was like really anxious, and even considering the idea of changing my major because I was fully content in suffering and doing what the Lord didn't have for me because it was going to please my parents. But since they brought it up and were the ones who said first, okay, hey, what's up? Why aren't you all in on fire protection? We can see it. We know that you're not actually loving this as much as you said you would, and as you were. If it wasn't for them doing that and the Lord like speaking through them, I wouldn't be here. I would be a fireman right now, probably unhappy, and really suffering because I know that wasn't what the Lord had for me. Do I still think that stuff is cool? Yes, absolutely. It's so cool. Have I still got like my EMT stuff? Yes, I would absolutely still kind of do that, and I think it's still amazing. But I know that the Lord doesn't have that for me, which is fine, and that is totally okay. So I would say just to end it, I would say that like there was a lot of anxiety with it, but there's no place I'd rather be. So
Well, and I was asking that because again, it's one of those like in our heads, we make that conversation, we make all of those things around it bigger than they may actually be. And I say it all the time because we always assume the worst. We assume the negative, and it's natural. We want to prepare for the worst. We want to be like, okay, I can't be let down if I'm already making this assumption that they're going to get angry with me. But here, you have the Lord like working through your parents, and your parents being like, come on, man, like, what are you doing? Like, we can tell you don't really enjoy this. And so I think that's the thing is, hey, for those listening, like, if you're feeling the Lord call you into something else, and again, that doesn't have to be a missionary overseas, right? It could just be, hey, instead of being a doctor, I want to be a police officer, or I want to be a firefighter, or I want to, be this and do this thing or whatever. Don't allow yourself to freak yourself out so much that you're unwilling to like have a conversation with your parents, because you could be surprised. Your parents may be like, we've known this all along. We just were waiting. And this is what I hear a lot. Parents will be like, hey, we've known this all along. We were just waiting for you to really understand it. And we wanted you to make that decision. Because that's the other thing is parents aren't necessarily wanting to be the ones. I mean, there are some, okay? There are some that want to tell their kids what to do. So I'm not taking away from that. But for the most part, they're like, hey, we just wanted you to make that decision on your own. Because that's part of adulthood, is coming to the place where we start to make decisions on our own. Yes, can I tell my kids what I think they should get, what they could get most with their money? 100%. Am I going to force them to listen to me and do the things that I tell them to do in that moment? No, because it's not a big deal, and I want them to learn to make decisions on their own. And that's the thing is we have to come to a place where we do start to make those small decisions on our own, but then we make the bigger decisions on our own. And God's going to give us opportunities to make small decisions on our own. Hey, when I get into college, I'm going to pursue my degree and do it well, but I'm going to intentionally get plugged into a campus ministry and a church so that I can grow spiritually. Those are the things I know I'm going to do. That's not a big decision. That's a pretty small decision. And then you ramp it up a little bit. It's like, hey, you know what? This ministry has really been impactful in my life. I want to serve on leadership. That's a little bit bigger decision. And I think what Chris was talking about, our yes on the table, it's like, hey, you know what? I've got 4 summers. I'm going to give up one of those to spend overseas on mission. I'm going to give up one of those to spend at, interning or doing something for the gospel. Doing these things that are going to stretch me and put me in a different kind of place than where I'm at. And that's something you don't have to really pray about. You can make that decision, this is what I want to do, and then you pray about, okay, Lord, send me where you want to send me. Hey, tell me what organization I should go through. Open the door that I can walk through. And I mean, obviously, we mention this all the time. We want to help people in that. But our suggestions are suggestions. That doesn't mean, hey, if I don't do the thing that Kyle suggests, he's going to be upset with me. Absolutely not. My encouragement is I want students to get plugged in and grow in their walk with Christ. And, I mean, to give up a summer or do those kinds of things. But, hey, if you get plugged in somewhere, and it's not with us or something like that, okay. I want to make sure spiritually, you are well, right? But that doesn't mean you have to do what I say you have to do. And so I think it's just kind of understanding and really trusting in the Lord when we make decisions. Saying, okay, God, I know I've got some options on the table, and I want to make the right decision. But hey, you've prepared me up to this point in my walk with you to where I feel like this is what you're leading me to do. Because the thing is, God sometimes he'll give you this thing called a choice, which is weird for us to really fathom, because we see in Scripture, it's like, hey, here are these heroes of the Bible doing these things, and how'd they know to do those things? It's like, well, God was leading them. It's like, but God also knew they were going to be faithful in the choice that they had made. And you guys have all mentioned it. Hey, when I make the decision, I need to be 100% invested. I can't just have one foot in on that decision and the other foot kind of trying to drag my way back to this opposite decision. It's like, no. I need to be fully committed. I need to be 100% involved in that time in this decision I've made. And that may be for a period of time. That doesn't mean, okay, hey, I'm going to do this thing and I use leadership a lot as an example, but it's like, if you're going to commit to being on a leadership team somewhere, be all in. That doesn't mean that you're committing to it the next 3 years of your college career. That means I committed to it for this year. Be all in. And then if it doesn't work out for the next year, okay. You have more classwork, you got more stuff going on, you're too busy. That's okay. That's not like I took a step back, you know? So I would just really emphasize and encourage what you guys kind of mentioned, but also just understand and rest in the fact that, hey, this decision in my mind is bigger than it may actually be. I need to just take some breaths, spend some time praying to the Lord, spend some time really just trusting His guidance, His Spirit, and where they are leading me, and go from there.
I really want to talk about some kind of hard decisions, that we oftentimes have to make within our lives, and like specifically in the aspect of relationships. So at times we're going to harm others or hurt others. Their feelings, maybe you say something that hurts their feelings, and you didn't mean for it to. And it would take you to going up to them to ask for forgiveness and maybe just apologizing to that person. But the really easy thing to do is just kind of step back and to shell up and not do anything about it. Why do we have to make that hard decision of, okay, well, I have to really humble myself here and go ask for that forgiveness, or I have to really go humble myself here and have this hard conversation with this person? Why is that something we have to do within this walk?
Because we're called to do it.
Well, I was gonna say yeah. Well, I was gonna even just say like, there's even just an element in like decisions like that of like, okay, Lord, like, yes, like we're called to do it, but also kind of asking like, what is gonna bring you the most glory? Like, what is gonna allow me to like put you on display? And that is seeking that person out for forgiveness, because that is what we are called to do. Because when you committed to Christ and you made that decision to follow Him, like you picked up your cross, and so you're gonna have to do the things that are implied with picking up your cross, and that's gonna be things that aren't always easy, but they're things that glorify the Lord, because, like Carl said, you are called to those things.
One thing I would say is, and this is an example I have of it unintentionally hurting somebody or making an unwise decision. And I go back, this would have been my senior year in college, and Thor, I think I don't know, maybe the first one. Maybe it was the first movie had just come out. Yes,
Thor?
the first one. Yeah,
Oh, you're old.
Shut up.
this guy, classic. And my friends were gonna go watch it. Okay, it was like during finals week, and so it's like, hey, everything's done. My friends are gonna go watch this movie. I had already set up a time to go. I mean, the girl I was dating at the time, I was like, hey, she was an RA, and so I was like, hey, you have a slot of time between like your rounds or your room checkouts or whatever for us to go get dinner, and so we'll go do that. I wanted to watch Thor as well, though. And so I was like, okay, hey, this movie's going to be, it was earlier in the afternoon. So I was like, all right, perfect. I'll get done with it, and then I'll be able to just head over there, and we can, go get dinner or whatever. I made the unwise decision of going to watch Thor because it was a longer movie. I didn't check the time. It was a longer movie, and there's always the scene after the credits. And my friends, I rode with my friends, so I didn't just drive myself. And it's like, great, like I'm late, and she's not going to be happy with me, which were all things that were very true. And I remember my buddy telling me, he's like, well, Kyle, now you have an opportunity for grace to be a part of the relationship. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, now you have an opportunity to step up and say, hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Will you please forgive me? And I think that's part of it, because oftentimes we hate that we've made the mistake. We hate that we hurt somebody, but we really hate the fact that we messed up and we are not perfect. So in that moment, wronging somebody, hurting somebody is a direct, like we are staring in the mirror at ourselves, showing us, hey, you're not perfect. You've screwed up. And it's very apparent now that you screwed up. And so we don't like that. But those are the moments when we are also face to face with the fact that God has shown us grace and He has offered us forgiveness. And so now we get an opportunity to go and ask for forgiveness from somebody else and ask for grace. So as much as difficult as it is, as awful as it can be, there can be good that comes from it because relationships can grow by confronting that person and saying, hey, you know what, I'm really sorry. I screwed up. I made an unwise decision, or I made fun of you, or I said this thing and I shouldn't have. I knew what I was doing. I'm not making excuses for it, and I just really apologize. Um, so sometimes, I mean, those things can be healthy, even though it's awful.
Yeah, and I think that the more you do it, the easier it gets. And Kyle's kind of pointed something out there that like we really focus on the fact that we're not perfect, and usually what we'll go to is doubling down on the fact that we think we're perfect. So that means not apologizing, standing up for something we may know is wrong. But as we humble ourselves to God and other people and start admitting we're wrong, and so being quick to apologize, it gets easier and easier. Of like now, and for me, this is something that I wholeheartedly believe in and do. Is like as soon as I kind of even feel that, like I went about that the wrong way. All right, let's apologize. And it really can grow a relationship, and not just like a romantic one, but like your platonic relationships, especially if you're in a leadership position. If you can humble yourself and go before those who are subordinate to you and be the first one to say, hey, I see that the way I went about this was wrong, or hey, I see that the way I said this hurt you, and I'm sorry for that. That shows leaps and bounds Christ's work in you than if you were just to double down and be like, nope, I did it right. Nope, not apologizing. And so making that hard decision and getting over yourself will really change the way that you like do relationships. And when it comes to decision making, like to me, it sounds like a hard decision, but honestly, it's an easy one. It's like, okay, do I want to pick Christ or not? Because we feel that pride in us when we're like, I won't say anything, it'll blow over, whatever. And so, like, what are you gonna do? It's not necessarily this hard decision of, oh, I can either go to this school or this school, which one's most honoring to God. It's like, okay, I feel that I've wronged someone. Am I going to choose Christ or not?
And I mean, I would say in this life, we're gonna deal with a lot of like big decisions, but we're gonna deal with so many more minor decisions and like little things like that. Of like, okay, maybe I just got to go apologize to somebody. Maybe I just got to find a place to eat. You know, it's that we're gonna deal with so many of those minor decisions in our lives than these bigger decisions. And one thing I'm just kind of we're kind of wrapping it up now, just to encourage you guys with is start making the minor decisions. Start there and being decisive there. Start making those little decisions of okay, going with a group of 3 to 4 people. Let's go eat here. All right, let's go eat in this place. Maybe making the decision to go apologize before like somebody actually proactively tells you to go apologize, to make that decision, do that yourself. Even when it may seem like the person didn't even wrong, like you didn't even wrong the person, that means a lot to somebody if you just go be proactive in that and go and apologize to them. Or just like making a decision of like just to join a leadership role, making that small decision of joining a leadership role at a either a church or at BCM or something like that. Making these small decisions will help you make the big decisions because of the practice that you put in and the work that you put in. So that's kind of what I really want to end it with
Can I say
encouragement
one
to you
more thing?
guys. Yeah,
Absolutely not.
Tyson.
When
yes.
it comes to apologies,
Yeah, go for it.
don't go to bed on it. Like if you're like, nah, I need to apologize. If you're not gonna see that person, just text them. If you are gonna see that person, do it like that time. Like so oftentimes we'll be like, oh, I'll do it when I see him again. No, you'll lose confidence or whatever. So like if you've wronged someone, like apologize just as quick as you can.
Yeah. So with this decision making, oftentimes it's hard, but it's something we have to do. And being decisive is something that is a part of growing up. So
That's right.
Unfortunately,
Making
it is. It.
And this is what I would say, men, fellas, if you're wanting to, I don't know, get married at any point in your life, ladies like it when you're kind of decisive.
Amen.
And so I would say, if you're dating somebody that doesn't let you make any decisions, then maybe you need to have a conversation or not date them. But B, if you are always the one that's like, oh, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Blah, 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 blah. Like, start making those decisions so that she can trust that you will make the important decisions when the time comes.
Snaps.
Good
Snaps
stuff.
for that.
That's good stuff.
That's good.
So
Yeah. So with that, we will see you guys next week. Thanks for hanging out with us. Be sure to tune in next week where we'll be having another awesome discussion. And if you want more information or want to ask us a question, make sure to follow us on Instagram at UCO BCM.